Hello. How are you? I want to talk about today a topic that has been swirling around my mind for probably months now. Something that I tried to talk about previously, but I don't know. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't like my vibe at the time. But I feel like this a lot. And I'm not quite sure if other introverted people or people with social anxiety, I'm not really sure if you feel this way. But sometimes you get like a pit in your stomach when like you don't live up to this certain expectation socially. And then you start to feel a bit of guilt. I mean, okay, listen, I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor or anything. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, how you should feel or how to cure it or whatever. I'm not doing that at all. I'm talking about some of my experiences and something that I want to talk about for a while, But anyway, let's get into it. I talked about this at some point. I'm not sure if I uploaded this episode or if it's just hanging around my computer somewhere, but I talked about like the changes that I've noticed when it comes to me being social from past years to recent years. It kind of had to do with the fact that I've become way less social, way more introverted, way more to myself after the pandemic and after all of that, how I've started to really think about things that are coming out of my mouth, how quickly my social battery's dying. Listen, I don't think before like the whole pandemic, I'm not saying that I was a super social person, but I think I was way more chill when it came to being social. Like I wasn't like so caught up in, the things that I was saying and like how I was being perceived by people. And it kind of allowed me to be social more comfortably. Really, the pandemic started my like second semester of my first year in college. And that was so strange because I was like, what is going on? Like, I mean, college is supposed to be like this super social place. And my perception of college has definitely changed since then. I go there every few days and suddenly this is not how it's going to be. Like, I feel like I started to get comfortable in this space. I started talking to people. And there was like this one specific class that I sat at this table with this group and they were really cool people. And we were kind of all different ages, but in the same, realm, maybe like a 4-year difference between some of us. And we were taking the same class. We were sitting at this table. We were talking. It was great. And I don't know, it felt like comfortable. I felt comfortable and I was excited for this class. And it was taken away, which for everybody. I'm not like being selfish here. I'm just saying like it was kind of stripped away from us. And I'm like, wait, so I finally start to feel comfortable in this setting and like now we have to do all of this online. Anyway, my point is I was comfortable at some point being social with people and I was excited to be social. And then the pandemic happens. You're at home. Everyone's at home. We're doing our work online. I never had, and by the way, a Zoom class. Like I've never had a class that was on Zoom yet. I mean, I've had meetings with like my advisor on Zoom, but I never had a class that was okay class, like open up your camera. It's like I've never had that. That was still, I mean, even now, I've never had one. That was so weird because everybody like on social media would be like making like Zoom humor. And I'm like, I don't get it. I never used Zoom for class. And that was so weird because for one, I feel like at least you're seeing other people's faces. Other people are there. But for me, it was just like online, you're to yourself, you're doing your work, you barely have any interaction with anybody, maybe like a discussion post, but who really goes back and responds to someone else's response, You barely have any interaction with your professor or your instructor or whatever, and it's really just like a really to yourself experience. And it really, I think, closed me off a little bit. It made me very to myself, way more to myself than I think I was even like a year prior to that or a few months prior to that. So that was new moving into that. I was working a job that was considered an essential business. So that was kind of the only social thing that I was getting in. And it was very difficult. It was not easy because, work is only social so much. I mean, I wasn't working like this super fun job. It was an essential business. And so you had to be there. It was a lot of changes going on. And at this time, I think I really did become way more to myself. Now, as years pass, as I'm still in college and trying to figure out what's going on socially. I'm trying to figure this whole thing out and how much control I have over like my social life and whatever. I'm still in this like bubble of my own. Like I'm not totally out of this bubble. I got very, very comfortable being to myself and relying on myself for entertainment and like creating fun for myself and like finding hobbies. I got very reliant on myself, which now I feel like I grew comfortable not having a social interaction. But now that I'm in college and I see it happening a little bit more often for other people, and I'm like, okay, wait, I kind of do need a friend here. I need someone to talk to. And this happened more when I was living on my own, like near campus or whatever. I saw this happening for people, but it was such a quiet solo experience for me. And I was like, okay, I need somebody. I need someone to talk to. I need someone to hang out with. I need someone to, have a conversation with or whatever. And I tried. I definitely tried. I went out to college events. I went to a couple parties. I went to a couple games, a couple tailgates. And it was with a group of people that were very, very, very nice to me. I don't know. It just never stuck because technically it wasn't my group of friends. It was my roommate's group of friends. And I was like, I want to find my own group of friends. But every single time I tried to do it, I noticed that I wouldn't try for long enough. I would go to these events. I went to a Black Student Union event and I was excited because I was like, listen, I'm going to make some friends here. I'm going to try. And I went alone. I went by myself. But when I got there, it was so completely overwhelming that I left early. And I was like, I can't do this. Like this is not good. And I feel like maybe if this was like a few years prior to that, maybe I would have been able to start a conversation with somebody. But again, I had gotten so comfortable with my own company that I hadn't had any practice with starting a conversation or like putting myself in these uncomfortable social, settings enough to feel comfortable like being there even. It was so packed and people were still a little bit worried about COVID and everything. And it was so packed shoulder to shoulder. And I was like, I cannot do this. And it looked like it could have been all in my head, but it looked like everyone already had a friend that they came with and people were running into each other from like high school. Like, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing here? I think I talked about that in one of my previous episodes, but it got like to a point where it was so overwhelming that I left. I got out of there. I was like, I can't do this. And I left, I got food and I went back to my apartment and turned on some Netflix and ate my food and relaxed and kind of just moved on. And this happened a few more times where like I went to these events and got like so socially overwhelmed. I'll say I don't think socially overwhelmed. Is that a thing? I don't know. But I know I got overwhelmed and I left or I didn't say anything and that's how that went. I'm noticing also how quickly my social battery is dying and how here's my theory, okay? I think your social battery is something that needs to be worked like a muscle. Like you go to the gym, when you first start at the gym, right? You're probably not your strongest, right? If your goal is to get stronger, you're probably not your strongest your first day at the gym, right? And you start lifting weights, you start working the specific muscle, your arms, I don't know, whatever. And eventually you start to be able to lift more, you get stronger, you start seeing your muscles, and I feel like your social battery is almost something that you have to work like that because, again, I said I was relying very heavily on my own company. I got very comfortable with my own company, so much so that I lacked social interaction. And so now I'm feeling like, okay, I'm in a social interaction nowadays, like right now, and I feel like I can feel my social battery dying. Listen, could be over the phone, on FaceTime with someone. Literally, I could be talking to somebody that I'm very close to, a family member, and I'm like, I have nothing else to contribute to this conversation. I have nothing else to say. I'm exhausted socially. I don't want to talk. I'm done. And I'm like wondering why that is. And like I said, it's a muscle I think that you have to work just like a muscle on your body. You have to kind of deal with the exhaustion for a while and kind of practice working through that exhaustion, just like you would practice working through the muscle exhaustion if you were working out so you can get stronger. I think it's something that you really have to work for your social battery to be able to last longer. If it's something that you really want, if it's a goal of yours, to be able to hang out with a select group of people or one person, or talk on the phone for a long period of time without feeling like you are just completely wiped at the end, because that's frustrating. I hate that feeling of being totally like exhausted after like a social interaction. I hate that feeling. I wanted to talk about the guilt kind of that comes with being an introvert sometimes. And it's not like this super heavy like guilt or anything. It's just like this mild sense of like, I wish I did something a little different there, but whatever. So like, again, say you're in some form of a social interaction with somebody and you're on a phone call and it's someone that you really do care about, and you guys kind of are having a good conversation. It's a good conversation. There's nothing better than a good flowing conversation. But eventually, like the ideas of the conversation, like they start to die down. Like not as many ideas are coming up, and you're kind of finding it more difficult to contribute to the conversation in any type of like relevant or helpful, productive way. So you kind of just like stop saying, and you're saying things and contributing, and your responses become more like, oh yeah, ha ha ha, right, yeah. And like you're not really contributing any new ideas to the conversation. And that's when I feel like my social battery starts to die. And the more I think about my social battery dying and notice how much my social battery is dying, because this does happen, and I'm like, I should really be saying more in this conversation. I should be saying something other than yes and no. And the more I think about my social battery dying, the faster it dies. It just keeps going until a point where I'm like, I don't know what else to say. And that's where the guilt comes in, because I'm like, okay, this person is having a conversation, this person is enjoying this conversation, but I just don't have anything else to say, and I don't want that other person to think that, she's not enjoying this, she's not having fun, she obviously isn't, because she's not saying anything. I don't want that other person to feel like that, because usually that's not the case. It's not that I'm not enjoying the conversation. It's more that I have run out of things to say, to contribute, partly because I'm just socially exhausted. And I wonder if that's kind of like tied into the way I'm thinking. Like I'm wondering if like I'm getting socially exhausted because I'm starting to think harder about what's coming out of my mouth. As we run out of ideas, you start to think a little bit harder about what you can bring up next. And I wonder if I'm like, maybe I should bring up this, but they don't really want to hear about that. Or maybe I should bring up that. Or, maybe I should bring up that, but that's not really relevant to the conversation. And the more I think about all of these little details of like what I want to bring up next, I'm honestly exhausting myself. As I'm talking right now, I'm coming to a conclusion. It doesn't usually have anything to do with the other person. It is all me. It is all in my head. The other person's not boring or anything. The conversation that we're having is not boring or anything. It's just the things that are going on in my mind that I think are exhausting myself. I'm exhausting myself, essentially. So that's one way. Another way is, I know I do this very often, and I know I'm not the only one. I tend to ghost unintentionally sometimes. I do not mean to leave someone on read or delivered. It's just that sometimes if we're texting back and forth about something, this still kind of has to go into like the concept of my social battery dying in an actual face-to-face social interaction or on the phone or whatever. I don't know. If we're like going back and forth in text over like a conversation, and I start to feel like I don't know what else to contribute, I might see the text and not respond, but then I intend to respond soon, but then maybe a few hours go by and I still don't respond. Maybe a day goes by and then I don't respond, and then I'm like, oh crap, I totally forgot to respond to that person. So I go back and I go and text that person, and that person may or may not respond immediately. So then I feel bad. I'm like, okay, I just left that conversation with no intention to like drop the conversation. I just didn't know what to respond, and I thought maybe let me just give myself a little extra time to think about what to respond, and then I'll come back and respond. But I kind of forgot. Sorry. But then I come back and I'm like, hey, sorry. And then I respond what I was going to respond. But then I feel bad. Like, I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry. And sometimes this could go on for like days. Like, I might forget for a few days and I'm like, oh crap, I got to respond to this poor person that was like having a good conversation with me. And I don't want them to feel like I left them undelivered or read intentionally. I'd rather have something good to contribute than just saying like LOL or yeah or something like that, or an emoji, you know? So I don't respond until I have something to respond, and that's not totally nice to the other person. I feel like in the moment I'm like, well, I'll think about something so that I can respond to this person, but in the moment they might just want an emoji, they just might want an LOL, you know? And I'm exhausting myself socially by overthinking the response when it could really just be a simple yeah, LOL, nah, or whatever. That's something I'm working on. Don't overthink something to a point where you're socially exhausting yourself. Anyway, I also feel some type of guilt towards myself sometimes. Like, I feel like, all right, Kirsten, you want to make friends, right? And you want to have these social interactions, right? So why don't you try harder when it comes to being social? Like, why don't you do that? Why don't you really put yourself in these uncomfortable social settings so that you could potentially make a friend? Why don't you try a little bit harder? And like, I'll ask myself this sometimes and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just way more comfortable at home. And sometimes it's not like a good answer. I mean, it's a good answer sometimes, I think, but like sometimes it's just not a good answer, because eventually you're really gonna want to have a friend for something, and you know, you're gonna have to put yourself in these like uncomfortable situations. So I kind of felt like a sense of like sadness for myself. Like, okay, you want these things, but maybe you're just so introverted and you've gotten so comfortable with yourself that this isn't for you. You may not make friends in college, but that's just how it is, and that's just what it's gonna be. You'll worry about this later. And I would think about these things and just say like, why do you do that? Why do you do that? I mean, you could honestly go out and make friends. You can try. It may not happen the first time. It may not happen the second time, not even the third time, but you have to keep showing up and keep going out and trying to do these things, so that maybe on the fifth or the sixth time you make a friend, you find someone to talk to. And I just won't push myself out of my comfort zone enough to make it to that fourth or fifth or sixth time, you know? Because I accept in myself, like, okay, maybe I'm just not going to make friends here. That's not how it's going to be. And then I start later, when I really do need a friend or somebody to talk to, I'm like, why do you do that to yourself? And then I get frustrated. But again, it's something that I'm working on. I'm trying to push myself a little bit harder lately with many different things. And that is one of them, the social aspect of my life, because I am someone that is introverted. I am an introvert. I do like being by myself. I do enjoy my quiet time, my peace, my solitude, whatever. But there's always times that you would love to have someone to talk to. You would love to hang out with somebody, you know? In order to do that, you need to jump out of your comfort zone a little bit, even if you have been relying on yourself for company lately. I was looking up, like, is too much alone time a bad thing? And I looked it up on Google. Obviously, it said, you know, like, I'm paraphrasing very, like, strongly here. And it said something like you start to, like, withdraw from community, and, you know, if you have too much solitude, and kind of, like, get very comfortable withdrawing from community. And it kind of, like, reflected on my social aspect of life, and I'm like, okay, it's not that I'm withdrawing from community and I want to withdraw from community. It's just that I'm very comfortable with my own company, and I guess that's where you have too much solitude. You need to be able to push yourself into these social interactions that are uncomfy, and not leave when you feel like you're uncomfortable and no one's talking to you and it looks like everyone came with somebody. I want to be able to sit at a restaurant table by myself and order food and sit there. That is not easy. I'm not talking about like a Panera Bread or like a Chipotle. I'm talking about a full-on restaurant where you order your food at the table, not like going through a line, you get your bowl or you get your plate or whatever and you sit down. No, I'm talking about sitting down, looking at the menu, ordering a drink. They bring your drink, they come back, they order your food, like that. That's scary to me. I guess there's scary aspects of both sides of the social spectrum. Am I making sense right now? I think this is where I'm supposed to end the episode. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening to this episode if you have made it this far. If you want to follow me on my socials for this podcast, my Instagram for this podcast is called Introverts Talk 2. Working on posting a little bit more on there. It's a little bit difficult. Instagram was a little bit more intimidating for me lately. And then my TikTok and YouTube for the podcast is Introverts Talk 2 podcast. So I would love if you followed those, subscribe, whatever. And I hope to have you listening to the next episode. I'm done. I digress. Thanks for listening. My name's Kirsten. Goodbye.